Long before the American Revolution broke out, a group of men began planting the seeds that would eventually sprout into the Revolution. Today, we're diving into the Sons of Liberty and exploring details you might have never heard. For example, John Hancock was one of the wealthiest men in the colonies and had the most to lose. So why did he strongly support the Sons of Liberty? And their protests ranged from peaceful to violent, but just how violent would they get? Stick around to find out. And, as always, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great U.S. history content. First of all, who were the Sons of Liberty? In short, they were a shadowy group pulling strings behind the scenes on the way to a revolution. But more specifically, the Sons of Liberty were a loosely organized band of American patriots who stood up against British policies a decade before the Revolutionary War officially kicked off. They first organized in the summer of 1765 in response to the hated Stamp Act, which placed taxes on paper goods like newspapers, legal documents, and even playing cards. This was on the back of another unpopular tax from the Sugar Act in 1764. It was at this moment that colonists said, "Enough is enough," and the seeds of revolution were planted. Many of their names might sound familiar: Samuel Adams, John Hancock, Paul Revere, James Otis, Patrick Henry, Samuel Chase, and Benedict Arnold, just to name a few. But what you might not know is that they weren't part of some formal national organization. They were scattered across the colonies, each chapter running its own show. Also, most of them weren't soldiers. They were merchants, lawyers, craftsmen, ordinary people with extraordinary courage. Each of them were putting their lives at risk by plotting a revolution, but some of them were well off financially with everything to lose, which underscored how passionately they detested British rule. For example, John Hancock, one of the wealthiest men in the colonies, wasn't just a peaceful protester, he was a full-fledged smuggler. His ship, ironically named the Liberty, was seized by British authorities in 1768 for allegedly smuggling goods without paying taxes. And while the charges were eventually dropped, it made Hancock a hero to the Sons of Liberty and a wanted man in the eyes of the British. Hancock's involvement wasn't just political, it was personal. His business interests were directly threatened by British taxes and trade restrictions. So, what did the Sons of Liberty really stand for? Were they freedom fighters or dangerous radicals? They believed they were standing up against injustice, especially the unfair taxes Britain kept piling on the colonies. No taxation without representation was their battle cry. They fought for individual rights and colonial autonomy, and while they often aimed to keep protests peaceful, they weren't afraid to turn up the heat when words weren't enough. One of the most extreme protests associated with the Sons of Liberty was organized by Ebenezer Mackintosh in August 1765. He led a mob that nearly destroyed the house of Lieutenant Governor Thomas Hutchinson in Massachusetts. They didn't just vandalize it, they stripped it bare, ripping out walls and furniture until only the frame remained. Imagine the chaos, the danger, and the sheer nerve it took to pull off something that bold. The Sons of Liberty's most well-known protest was the Boston Tea Party in 1773. Disguised as Mohawk Indians, they stormed British ships and dumped an entire shipment of tea into Boston Harbor. This wasn't a peaceful protest. It was a bold, defiant act against the Tea Act. They weren't just about protests either. The Sons of Liberty knew how to use propaganda and public outrage to their advantage. They organized boycotts, spread powerful messages through print media, and mobilized citizens to take action. The principles they defended would later help shape the Declaration of Independence. But at the time, they were seen as rebels and outlaws, risking everything to fight an empire. Despite their common enemy, they were divided on how far they were willing to go. Samuel Adams, known for his fiery passion, was all about direct action and aggressive tactics like the Boston Tea Party. Meanwhile, John Hancock, who had business interests to protect, preferred a more cautious legal approach, despite his earlier smuggling activities that painted him as a daring rebel. Patrick Henry was ready for militant resistance, while Benedict Arnold, long before his infamous betrayal, leaned toward strategic caution. And then there was James Otis, who argued for legal action rather than street-level rebellion, clashing with Samuel Adams's more pragmatic, hands-on methods. These differences weren't just about strategy. They were about personal beliefs, moral codes, and the balance between bold action and careful planning. One thing's for sure, no matter what approach they took, the risk was enormous. They were labeled criminals and traitors by the British Crown. If caught, they faced imprisonment, loss of property, or even execution. Operating in the shadows meant constantly watching for spies and betrayal, knowing one mistake could cost them everything. To keep their movements secret, they met in places like the Green Dragon Tavern in Boston, places that felt safe but were never completely secure. They sent coded messages and used symbols to mark safe locations or communicate plans. Print media became one of their strongest weapons, spreading their ideas far and wide while hiding the identities of those behind the words. Through it all, they never gave up. They never backed down. And by the end of their story, one thing became clear. A small group of rebels, each with their own disagreements and flaws, had managed to lay the groundwork for a revolution. They weren't just fighting for independence, they were fighting for survival. And now that you know the secrets behind the Sons of Liberty, it's clear they did more than just challenge British authority. They dared to change history itself. So, what do you think of the Sons of Liberty? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this U.S. history deep dive, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more great history content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.